Do you crack under the pressure, or do you become really, really focused and deal with it? When we have a really, really hard track session, do you get nervous looking forward to Tuesday, or do you get really, really excited to go and smash that session? That would be the difference between you being mentally tough and perhaps more mentally sensitive. So some people just are tougher than others, but it's tough versus sensitive. Next one. Let's take it to specifically sport and training. If you're mentally tough, or if you're looking for an optimal, I can't speak, 4:15, optimal sort of sensation, if you like, I'd like to call it your ideal performance state. So how do you perform optimally or ideally? And what is this feeling? What does it look like? 5 things I would say that you need to use. So number 1, improve your self-awareness. So know your strengths, identify your weaknesses. We've sent this out before. Tom attached a performance profiling chart, which makes you sit down as an athlete and reflect on what you're good at and what you need work on. Really simple. Double down on the strengths and then have a look at the weaknesses. Improve those weaknesses so there's less of them. You can also do mental skill assessments. You can find them all online to find out mentally where you're lacking. Next one is becoming resilient. So develop a refocusing routine that will allow you to quickly recover from mistakes when they happen in racing. Set goals to achieve the same winning mindset before every session, before every race, before every rehab, before every meal, so that you know before you go into these scenarios, you're always going to come out on top. Third one, increase confidence. So have your mind full of past successes. So reasons why you can perform, and remember those when you're in those tough sessions in training. If you've smashed the lactate threshold test before, and that was high-end zone 4, remember how that felt, so that when you go into the next session, you can pull back those feelings. Tough thinking. So to be mentally tough, you need to have a strong mind. That means mastering your self-talk, choosing what thoughts you use in situations. So recognize when you're having these negative or detrimental thoughts and use techniques to stop, change them, and flip them to positive thoughts. And the last one, perform under pressure. So again, to be mentally tough, you need to show your best when you really need it. What skills do you need? Are they technical? Are they physical? Are they mental? Good example I like to use for this is Colin O'Brady. Although some of it's been called into question whether or not his Arctic challenge was fully valid, but some of the training stuff that he talks about was absolutely mind-blowing. For those that don't know, he was the first man to walk across Antarctica unassisted. In one of his training sessions, he would be in a wall sit with his feet in ice buckets and his hands in ice buckets. And then whenever he'd come out of the wall sit, his coach would make him do dexterity tasks with his fingers. So when his fingers are freezing, he's shaking, he's almost getting frostbitten, because ultimately it would save his life in the long run. So he's teaching him to perform under pressure so that when he went to the Arctic, he was able to utilize those skills. And if you read his book, it actually paid dividends, because his tent nearly blew away one time when he was trying to tie a knot. Next. It's not me, that's me finished.
Cool. So the next question is, 1 zone 4 session a week alongside training at math enough to still benefit? Mr. George Crew is answering this one.
Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, so it is one, a lot of people want to know, can they just do it once and get away with it? Because not everyone enjoys zone 4. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's a bit like Marmite. So yeah, we want to know, can you get away with it? Well, this again, like we always say, this all depends on the athlete, the experience of the athlete and their training history. It depends on that athlete's goal. So what distance are they aiming for? Like someone like Rob Jones, for example, who often does long distance races. He's not going to do loads and loads of zone 4 training just because it's not relevant to what his goal is or what his distance he's aiming for. And then also it all depends on when you plan to do a race or when you plan to peak. So say right now, none of us really have any races, so there's no point in doing loads and loads of zone 4. You're not going to benefit from it as much. You will get better, but it depends if you want to aim for a race or not. What else we got? Yeah, so the closer to a goal, the more likely you are to have more zone 4 training in your plan. So at the moment, once a week would be fairly fine. But if you have a race in the near future, say in 6 weeks to 8 weeks time, then a few more zone 4 sessions would be very relevant. Again, it depends on that race. For people who are doing 10K, 5K races, then they're going to want quite a bit of zone 4. I'd say 3, maximum 4 sessions a week. You need to remember that you need quite a lot of time to recover from this zone. So I've actually included a screenshot of my training peaks from the race I did in Bahrain in February. So this was a 12K Spartan race. And if you have a look over the red line, I very quickly went up into zone 4. So it's just so you guys know that how relevant zone 4 is. You want to get used to training in zone 4 if you're doing these shorter distance races. So this was 12K. So I'd say up to 12, probably up to 15K. Then you could get away with doing zone 4 because you're going to need it in your races. Anything more than that, if you're doing any longer distance, up to half marathon pace, you want to be in the lower zones. So going back to the overall question, can you benefit? It all depends on the race, the distance, and when do you want to peak? All right. What else have I got down there? So yeah, all in all, basically, guys, you need, if you're doing a 5K or a 10K race, this is like your 5K or 10K race pace. So it's basically max effort. Like what Tom said, the longest you can hold for an hour, this is your lactic threshold. All right, so zone 4, hold it. Yeah, I think that's it, guys.
Cool. Our next one is a good one. It says, doesn't zone 4 training contradict all the talk around zone 2? Zone 4 improves running for longer. Rob Foster is taking this one.
Hello, how's it going? Yeah, so it's actually a pretty interesting question. And when we've been going through a lot of these chats, it's been like, yeah, zone 2, zone 3, and then it all gets a bit smushed in the middle. So I thought I'd just go over what zone 2 does. So zone 2 basically increases your ability to use fats as a fuel source and call it your efficiency. So the mitochondria, cellular adaptations, so how many mitochondria you've got, the old powerhouse, and the cardiovascular system. So when training in zone 2, we are going aerobic, and we can put a lot of volume there because it's not too intense, and spending specific time within zone 2 creates these specific adaptations, sorry. As you go through to zone 4, click. We're looking at a few more like specific race specific adaptations and speed as well. So zone 4, obviously, it's at your lactate threshold. So lactate threshold is increased. Cellular also increases, and VO2 max also increases. But you can't spend as much time here, basically, because it's so intense. So the main differences really between zone 2 and zone 4 is intensity level and the training adaptations and the efficiency around your lactate threshold. So getting rid of your lactate that builds up in the blood and the muscles and clearing it, and then still utilization of glycolysis and aerobic endurance, aerobic metabolism. One thing also worth mentioning here is that when you look at your zones, never look at them in isolation. So zone 2 and zone 4, some people say, oh, should I just train zone 2? And then some people say, oh no, should I train zone 4? If you don't develop a good aerobic base, you can't train at lactate threshold as efficiently and effectively as if you had. Basically, without zone 2, without a good aerobic base, you can't train effectively in zone 4, and get the maximum benefit. So zone 2 makes you can go all day. It's about creating energy efficiently using fats and glycolysis, and then, or glycogen, sorry. And then zone 4 in terms of lactate is same, but a lot more intense and less fat. So without the backup of the zone 2, you can't really hit zone 4 properly. Yeah, it's not more intense at all. Skip the next one. As Tom already showed you, the main benefits you're looking for in zone 4 are your lactate threshold. So the shift to the right, so you can run basically at a faster speed. Oh, Miranda, she's jumped on. Yeah, so that's your speed in kilometers along the bottom, and then your lactate along the left. So speed increases at a similar rate of lactate buildup. So basically you get faster and fitter, and that will be seen in zone 4 training. So that's one of the main things we're looking for here. And if you skip to the next one, I think it's a pretty important one. So besides like pure physiology of zone 4 training and the things you get from that, it's Mr. Kipchoge here is a beautiful example of how to run economically. Oh, he's bouncing. Yeah, so Kipchoge is very economic runner, and when we train at zone 4, we don't only get your physiological adaptations, you get to increase your running economy. So a lot of research has gone into this, and I wrote an article about it when I first got here, and how economic you are goes beyond your physiology. It's massive determinant for sure, but running fast and the building up that neuromuscular awareness at speed and your efficiency of the body movements, like the contraction and muscle, how long your ground contact time is, those factors are all trained and perfected at your race pace or your lactate threshold if you're a 10K runner. And even if you're an ultra runner, say you've got a year to train for an event and you want to maximize how fast you can go at a lower level. Well, the definition of running economy is energy demand for a given velocity of a submaximal running speed. So if I train my ultra marathon runner to run economically, which needs time in zone 4 to build up that schema, to build up that good movement patterns and an economic style, then when we go back down to his or hers like 13-hour run pace for 100K ultra, their cost of energy is going to be significantly less than had they not spent time in zone 4. So the question was, is it not a contradiction? The answer is not really. If you look at the the different benefits you get from each zone, and the place each point takes in terms of a build towards your event. So each zone has their place and their specific adaptations that you want to gain from each place. So zone 4 has some great stuff for economy and lactate threshold, which means you run faster for less. And then to back that up, you need your aerobic base so you can keep going all day. It's pretty interesting, but yeah, I think that's me done. Enough of a ramble there.
Cool. Lovely. Guys, obviously get questions into the chat. We've had in from Mr. Winter. Mate, can you just talk yours? It's quite long to read out.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a fun one. So as we age, our max heart rate reduces.
Yeah.
Which means that our zones will adjust downwards. Then we take an example of biking where our power, despite our age, can increase exponentially. So does that then mean that the older man is more efficient because he can produce a higher power at a relatively lower max heart rate than the younger man? It's obviously not a correct statement, but
it's quite, in basic terms, that would make sense, but you've already said why, and that's because max heart rate reduces with age. So
Yeah.
you're basically shifting the percentages of the zones stay the same, but you're shifting them downwards because the max heart rate has gone down with it. So no, the cost would be the same if we're assuming that their power zones are lining up with their heart zones.
I think what's interesting is the serious question is, why does your max heart rate reduce as you age, and therefore how is it possible that the body can still continue to tolerate a higher effort at a lower max heart rate?
Heart rate reduces. I'm not actually sure the true science behind it.
Mechanics behind it, yeah.
It's essentially a down regulation of less demand for blood around the body as you get older. So muscle mass also decreases. That's mainly because testosterone starts to decrease. I don't know whether it's chicken or the egg, but your demand for blood becomes less. You're less able to run at higher speeds, therefore you don't need as much or as stronger muscles as well. So that could also be a reason. So you get a reduction in max heart rate. What you can see though, and this is shown time and time again, study after study, is you can take an untrained individual at any age and you can make them fitter. And by using not just aerobic zones, you can use higher zones to help to get them fit at any age. So it doesn't matter whether an untrained 70-year-old is getting trained or an untrained 20-year-old, they will still see very similar adaptations for when they start a training program. So that's quite an interesting insight into what that means in terms of how you use the heart rate zones, and also how they work in terms of the adaptation. So for the 70-year-old, getting the heart rate above maybe 120 beats is similar to the 20-year-old getting the heart rate above 180 beats. It's not about the number of beats of the heart rate, it's about the adaptation that causes to the person's physiological state.
We actually, we talked about this on the podcast once, Tom, or we talked about age-related declining. I think, I don't think, I've got the numbers here, so why am I trying to, so we looked at the typical, or the average decrease in aerobic fitness per decade is 9%, and with that comes a 7 beat drop in your max heart rate. But with that, every decade you lose about 10% muscle mass across your body in a decade. And what you're losing, you're not losing muscular strength, you're more losing muscular power. Unfortunately, after 35, there's no way to stop this decline. It's going to happen. But what you can do is reduce the curve. It's a hot topic at the minute, isn't it? You can reduce the curve by staying consistent, staying motivated, staying healthy, and just slow your decline, basically.
Doing TRT. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions, guys, on zone 4? Who enjoys zone 4 threshold? It depends a lot on your mood, right? Depends how you're feeling. It's really hard to get up to a zone 4 session if you're not ready to be suffering. So
yeah,
how much mental fortitude comes into zone 4 and how much of it is fitness is always...
Everyone can relate to going to Track Tuesday, to one of those hard sessions where it's 8 by 800, and by the 4th one they're just not in it, and so the pace just drops off, and in their head they just go, you know what, I'm just going to go a little bit slower today. I'll drop by 15 seconds per K and I'll hold that pace instead. And it's not necessarily fitness, because your fitness hasn't dropped off in a week. If you've been doing your training right, you've been sleeping well, you've been eating well, you might be fatigued from something going on, but your fitness hasn't changed. So it is mostly mental.
And it's also, if you're not good at mentally handling zone 4, you will just naturally revert back to the zone below, which is zone 3, which is middle of the road. which is why it can get such a bad rap, because people don't go hard enough when they need to go hard and default back to the zone underneath it and not go easy enough to get the adaptations from zone 2. So a lot of it comes down to your mental fortitude when it comes to training zone 4.
Do you guys find it easier? I was thinking about this the other day because I've got a 5K time trial coming up, and I was thinking, do you guys find it easier to be chased or chase in zone 4?
I'm not fast enough to be chased.
Do you like the carrot, or do you like potential tiger ripping your leg off?
Mate, whenever I go into aid stations at ultras, there's nothing left.
all out.
Now, jokes aside, I like sitting. Like whenever, if I'm doing a really, really hard interval where I'm actually pushing, I like to sit behind someone that's setting this for me, if I can, if it's possible. Just so there's less to think about. So all you have to think about is sitting on the ass of that person. Just realised how that came out.
2 in 2 days.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Beautiful.
4:53, guys. Morning.
I don't know if we could spring a sentence together.
We're not the BBC, it's fine. There's no curfew.
Good.
I like to chase.
Any other questions for zone 4, guys?
I think Rickson put, it keeps it interesting. That's not quite a question, but that made me, I'm slightly concerned.
Actually, I have a question for George.
Oof.
I was just thinking about this. So, in the shorter races, George, in the shorter races, you're going to be running at pretty much zone 4 or just below zone 4 for the entire race. How do you then, or what happens to your heart rate when you come to the obstacles? Does it go up further, or do you let everything calm down and focus more on the running in between?
Mate, when you're trying to get through an obstacle, something like barbed wire crawl, your heart rate goes higher. It seems to shoot up. It's like going into complete anaerobic, maybe even zone 5. If you look at that graph that I put in the previous slides, my heart rate actually went up to over 200. I think that was on the obstacles.
It's another one with like feed stations. When people aren't practicing drinking and eating in their training runs, when they get to a feed station, that pause of taking food down and not breathing within the rhythm they were in can actually knock their heart rate up higher and make them feel more out of breath. So that's another important place to practice it as well.
And Marcus has just put a little comment in there about mindset and zone 4. Lack of understanding of what is required of the zone. This is to be a mindset issue, which by listening to this talk should be solved. It is mindset though, isn't it? It's so mindset. Like I did that threshold session on the bike yesterday, which was disgusting. I'd say my mindset was there because I finished the set, but it's just being in that pain, like that little area where your legs are literally screaming at you, and you like normalizing to that. I think so the first set's always the hardest for me. After that though, it's either I'm fine and I'm just happy there, just sitting, and then I can actually kick on from that point, or it doesn't get any better and my legs completely imploding me.
Yeah, well, there's also sometimes a thought that, oh, it's threshold, I need to go really hard, and people actually knock themselves even higher into zone 5. And so the rate of exhaustion just goes from being slowly inclining up that you should get for 60 minutes and just goes straight up.
Yeah.
So it's being clever as well of understanding, okay, if you're using a direct output of work, so power, that you can watch go into zone 4 immediately and then hold it steady within watching your power numbers. But if you're using heart rate, you're going to wait about 30 to 40, sometimes up to 60 seconds of heart rate coming up into zone 4, and then make it plateau out. What most people think is, oh, zone 4 intervals, I need to go straight into it, and then they go too hard and it just keeps going up and over. So like, this is why we're doing the zones series, is so you guys understand what they are, what they should feel like. And if you're a minute into a 6-minute block at zone 4 and you're working at a 10 out of 10 effort scale, it's too much. You need to back it off. Threshold should be hard, but it comes in time. It's like wait for the pain of it to come to you, basically. Don't go searching for it. What we're going to do
lag
is zone 5 and zone 1, but more importantly zone 5 is you go looking for it. With zone 4, we're still waiting for it to come to you.
That's a decent point. So what's this is me just asking, just putting out there, forget the heat for the minute, but heart rate zones compared to pacing zones for zone 4 efforts in running. Discuss.
I think if you know your time, if you have a time you want to hit,
yeah,
then you go off pace on your race pace sessions. If you're in a training block and you're saying, okay, this training block is around building your base and your aerobic work, then you go off your heart rate because that defines your physiological adaptations.
Yeah.
So it always comes back to, it depends, but it's very much down around whether you're in a peak phase, a base phase, or a build phase. It's different metrics that you use. Ideally, you can look at your pace and say, okay, that matches up really nice with my heart rate. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. We're always so reliant on our devices being correct that we are pretty much a victim to these devices being correct. And obviously we know with heart rate and things, especially now it's getting to summer and, you know, you're just sweating insane amounts and things, you can't trust it completely. So you've got to be able to transfer between, okay, I know what my pacing zones are and I know what my heart rate zones are. I know that right now I'm running in pace zone 2, but my heart rate is like zone 4, zone 5. Well, either something's not right because I feel like I'm at an RPE of 3 to 4, or no, actually I feel really gassed, like I'm an RPE of like 7 to 8. My heart rate is aligning up with that, but my pace is right down. Okay, I'm cooked, I need to stop the session.
Yeah, I was thinking zone 4 pacing zones is quite a nice thing because the blocks are a little bit shorter, and you're right, that lag does come in a bit later. It's a more instantaneous feedback system, so you don't have to guess so much within that first 60 seconds, or maybe even 2 minutes sometimes, about if you're in the right zone. So it's a bit like that running power we were talking about, where that instantaneous feedback gives you a lot better metric, so that when you're training, like that whole 6 minutes or 8 minutes or 12 minutes, whatever that threshold session is a lot more accurate, and you get it from the start.
Yeah, I think a good general rule is, if you're trying to get aerobic or recovery adaptations from a session, ignore your pace, go off feel and heart rate. You want performance from a session, you go more off your pace and feel rather than heart rate. We have one more question from Miranda. It says, holding zone 4 in this heat or humidity is near impossible. No, I jump all over the place. It's definitely not impossible. I think if you're jumping all over the place and you're looking at like heart rate, then maybe check battery in the heart rate monitor, placement of it as well. It shouldn't really be jumping too much. Well, it's also a bit of a skill to be able to hold your zones.
Your pace is just going to be slower than what it'd be in the winter. So you almost have to redefine your pacing zones, but your heart rate zones should pretty much be the same.
Yeah.
Good. All right. 8:01. That's it.
That's it. Done.
Another Tuesday down. Thank you all for coming. We will see you Thursday morning for coffee chats. And then next week, back in Sunday session and Talk Tuesday. Goodbye.
Have a good day, everybody.